A young woman screams in voices that aren't her own, while her family watches in terror. This isn't a scene from a movie. It's the true story that was too scary for Hollywood to tell. This is the real life of Anneliese Michel. And what happened to her still divides people today. Was it illness? Was it possession? Or was it a tragic collision of faith, fear, and suffering? This is her story. Anneliese Michel was born in West Germany in 1952. She grew up in a deeply religious Catholic family. Prayer, church, discipline, and the fear of sin were part of her world from childhood. To people around her, Anneliese was quiet, sensitive, and faithful. She was not someone who seemed destined to become part of one of the most disturbing exorcism cases in modern history. But when she was around 16, strange symptoms began. At first, they looked medical. She suffered from seizures. Sometimes she became dizzy. Sometimes her body would freeze. Sometimes she would stop responding to the people around her. Her family took her to doctors. She was diagnosed with serious neurological and psychiatric problems, and she was given medication. For a while, her family hoped treatment would help. But as the years passed, Anneliese's condition became more frightening. She said she could see terrifying faces. She said she heard voices. Voices that whispered to her. Voices that told her she was cursed. Voices that told her she belonged to them. Then came the part that terrified her family most. Anneliese began reacting badly to religious objects. She struggled around churches. She could not look at holy images the way she once did. To doctors, this could still be explained through illness, psychological distress, or religious obsession. But to her family, it looked like something else, something spiritual, something evil. And that belief slowly pulled Anneliese away from hospitals and toward a much darker path. By the early 1970s, Anneliese's behavior had become harder to control. She screamed without warning. She spoke in strange tones. She moved in disturbing ways. She reportedly harmed herself, tore at her clothes, and behaved in ways that terrified the people around her. Her family watched the girl they loved change into someone they could barely recognize. Doctors had tried to help. Medication had been given. Treatment had been attempted. But from the family's point of view, nothing was saving her, so they turned to the church. At first, the church did not immediately agree to perform an exorcism. A formal exorcism is not supposed to happen just because a family asks for it. There must be investigation, signs, and permission. But Anneliese's family kept asking for help. They believed their daughter was not only sick, they believed something had entered her, something that hated prayer, something using her body as a prison. Eventually, priests became involved, and in 1975, permission was given for a formal exorcism. That decision changed everything. From that point on, Anneliese's suffering was no longer treated only as a medical crisis. It became a spiritual battle. A battle between priests and invisible enemies. A battle between science and belief. A battle that Anneliese's body would not survive. The exorcisms began in 1975. Anneliese was 23 years old. The priests used Catholic prayers and rituals, trying to force the evil spirits to leave her body. But the sessions quickly became terrifying. Anneliese screamed. She growled. She cried. Sometimes she spoke in voices that disturbed everyone in the room. Sometimes she had to be held down. Sometimes her body twisted with such force that the people around her believed something inhuman was inside her. The priests demanded that the spirits identify themselves. According to claims made during the case, the voices gave names. Not one demon. Several. To the believers in that room, this was proof that Anneliese was not alone inside her body. But to medical experts, the same events could mean something very different. They could be symptoms of epilepsy, psychosis, extreme mental distress, religious fear mixing with illness. That is what makes this case so disturbing. The same scream can have two meanings. To a doctor, it may be a symptom. To a priest, it may be a demon. But one thing was undeniable. Anneliese was suffering, and her suffering was getting worse. As the exorcisms continued, Anneliese grew weaker. The rituals did not happen once or twice. They continued for months. Again and again, priests came to the house. Again and again, prayers were spoken. Again and again, Anneliese screamed, cried, struggled, and collapsed. Her family believed they were fighting for her soul. The priests believed they were confronting evil. But while everyone focused on what might be inside her, her physical body was failing. She became thinner, weaker, more exhausted. She stopped eating properly. She stopped drinking enough. Her strength faded day by day. The horror of this story is not only the possibility of possession, It is the possibility that everyone around her became so focused on demons that they stopped seeing the dying girl in front of them. Imagine the room, prayers echoing, a young woman restrained on a bed, her family crying, priests commanding invisible spirits to leave, and behind all of it, a terrible truth growing clearer every day. She needed food, she needed water, she needed medical care, she needed help. But the battle continued. Anneliese kept disappearing. By 1976, Anneliese was in terrible condition. She was extremely weak. Her body had been pushed too far. The exorcisms had gone on for months, and the people around her believed the spirits were still fighting back. Some reports say she believed her suffering had a spiritual purpose. Some say she wanted the pain to end. But whatever she believed, her body was dying. She was malnourished. She was dehydrated. She could barely hold on. The girl who had once gone to school, prayed with her family, and dreamed of a normal life had become a shadow of herself. Then, on July 1, 1976, Anneliese Michel died. She was only 23. The exorcism stopped. The prayers stopped. The voices stopped. But the questions did not. After her death, the story moved from the bedroom to the courtroom. After Anneliese died, authorities investigated what had happened. The case shocked Germany. A young woman had died after months of exorcism rituals. She had become severely malnourished and dehydrated. Her parents and the 2 priests involved were accused of failing to get her the medical help she needed. The trial became a clash between 2 worlds. On one side was faith, the belief that Anneliese had been possessed, the belief that the priests were trying to save her soul, the belief that medicine could not explain everything. On the other side was law and science. Doctors argued that her symptoms could be connected to serious illness. The prosecution focused on the fact that Anneliese needed medical care and did not receive enough of it. Recordings from the exorcisms were played in court. People heard her screams, her strange voices, her suffering. For believers, those recordings were evidence of possession. For skeptics, they were evidence of a young woman in unbearable pain. In the end, Anneliese's parents and the 2 priests were found guilty of negligent homicide. They received suspended sentences. The trial ended, but the debate never did. Years later, Anneliese Michel's case became known around the world. Her story inspired books, documentaries, debates, and horror films. The most famous was The Exorcism of Emily Rose. The movie changed names, locations, and dramatic details, but the fear behind it came from this real case. A young woman, a terrifying condition, a religious family, exorcisms, a death, and a courtroom asking whether demons were real or whether belief had gone too far. That is why this story still feels disturbing. It is not only a ghost story. It is not only a medical tragedy. It is not only a religious case. It is all of them at once. For believers, Anneliese was a victim of demonic forces. For skeptics, she was a victim of untreated illness and dangerous superstition. For many others, she was a young woman failed by everyone around her, and maybe that is the most frightening version. Not that demons were real, but that fear was powerful enough to become deadly. So what really happened to Anneliese Michel? Was she possessed? Was she mentally ill? Was she suffering from epilepsy, psychosis, trauma, religious fear, or something else? People still disagree. The medical explanation is that Anneliese suffered from serious neurological and psychiatric problems. Her seizures, hallucinations, religious reactions, and extreme behavior can be understood through illness. The religious interpretation sees something different. Her reaction to holy objects, the voices, the strange strength people claimed she had, the names allegedly spoken during the rituals, the terrifying recordings. For believers, these details point toward possession. For skeptics, they show how deeply illness, fear, and belief can mix inside the human mind. But there is one truth no one can deny. Anneliese Michel died. A real person died. Behind the horror movie, behind the online clips, behind the legend, there was a young woman who suffered for years. And whether the cause was medical or supernatural, the ending was tragic. The story of Anneliese Michel remains one of the darkest cases ever connected to modern exorcism. It inspired the exorcism of Emily Rose. It shocked Germany. It divided doctors, priests, believers, and skeptics. Decades later, people still ask the same question. Was Anneliese Michel possessed by demons, or was she a sick young woman destroyed by fear, faith, and neglect? Maybe the answer depends on what you believe. But one thing is certain. When the exorcisms ended, Anneliese was gone. Before Emily Rose was a movie character, there was Anneliese Michel, A real girl, a real death, and a mystery that still whispers from the darkness.